Picture a sprawling city, grand temples reaching toward the sky, bustling marketplaces alive with voices, homes filled with families going about their daily lives. Now imagine that same city frozen in time. The temples still stand, the market stalls remain stocked, the homes untouched, but the people gone, vanished without a single clue, as if they simply walked away into thin air. This isn't the plot of a mystery novel or some distant future dystopia. This is the real, haunting legacy of civilizations like the Maya, the Indus Valley, and other societies that thrived for centuries, only to disappear without a trace, leaving behind only whispers in the ruins. What could make an entire civilization abandon everything? What forces, natural or man-made, could be so powerful, so unstoppable, that they erased whole cultures from history? These aren't just academic questions, they're puzzles that tug at the very fabric of human existence, challenging our assumptions about progress, survival, and the fragility of even the mightiest empires. Think about it, societies with advanced engineering, intricate trade networks, and rich artistic traditions wiped from the map, their stories left unfinished. The eerie silence of their abandoned cities speaks louder than any history book ever could. That's the mystery we're unraveling today. From the jungles of Central America to the deserts of the Middle East, we're piecing together the clues: climate catastrophes, warfare, disease, even celestial events that may hold the answers to these ancient disappearances. But this isn't just about the past. Every collapsed civilization holds a mirror to our own world, a stark reminder of how interconnected we are with the environment, with each other, and with the choices we make. So join me as we step into the shadows of these lost empires, because their secrets might just reveal more about our future than we ever imagined. One of the most chilling realizations about vanished civilizations is that their collapses rarely had a single cause. Like dominoes falling in perfect sequence, multiple pressures often stacked up: environmental strain, social unrest, economic instability, until the entire system buckled under the weight. Take the Maya, whose mathematical and astronomical brilliance still leaves us in awe. For centuries, they thrived in the dense jungles of Central America, building towering pyramids and intricate cities. But their sophisticated agricultural system, dependent on seasonal rains, became their Achilles heel. Prolonged droughts turned fertile land to dust, triggering food shortages that rippled through society. At the same time, warfare between rival city-states drained resources, while overpopulation strained their delicate ecosystem. It wasn't just one disaster that undid them, it was the perfect storm. Then there's the mystery of the Greenland Norse, Viking settlers who clung to the edge of the known world. For generations, they raised cattle, built churches, and traded walrus ivory with Europe. But when the Little Ice Age descended, their European-style farming methods failed spectacularly. While the indigenous Inuit adapted by hunting seals and moving with the ice, the Norse stubbornly held to traditions that no longer served them. Starvation crept in, trade routes collapsed, and eventually silence swallowed their settlements. Their story is a haunting lesson in the cost of inflexibility, how clinging to the familiar can be just as dangerous as any external threat. But not all collapses were slow unravelings. Some civilizations faced sudden, catastrophic blows. The thriving city of Mohenjo-Daro, jewel of the Indus Valley, shows signs of violent destruction: skeletons scattered in streets, buildings scorched by unimaginable heat. Archaeologists debate whether it was an invading army or a natural disaster like an earthquake or even an ancient cosmic airburst, a catastrophic explosion from a meteorite detonating in the atmosphere. Whatever happened, it was swift and merciless, wiping out one of the world's first urban planners in what might have been a single, terrible day. What ties these stories together isn't just tragedy, it's the uncomfortable truth that no civilization, no matter how advanced, is immune to collapse. The common thread, a failure to adapt. Whether it's the Maya ignoring shifting weather patterns, the Norse refusing to learn from their Inuit neighbors, or even the possibility that Mohenjo-Daro's leaders never saw disaster coming, these societies reached a tipping point where change became impossible. And that's what makes their ruins so unsettling. They're not just relics of the past, they're mirrors forcing us to ask, are we paying attention to the cracks in our own foundations? The relentless power of nature has rewritten human history time and again, not with subtle warnings but with earth-shattering finality. Consider the Acadian Empire, once the mightiest civilization on Earth, stretching across Mesopotamia with unprecedented military and cultural influence. Then, around 4,200 years ago, the rain stopped. Not for a season, not for a decade, but for centuries. Ancient dust layers tell the story. What was once fertile farmland became a cracked wasteland, forcing entire cities to empty as crops failed and starvation spread. The empire that invented centralized government, the postal system, even the concept of the 60-minute hour crumbled into dust, its people scattering like seeds in the wind. Half a world away, the sophisticated Minones faced a different kind of disaster. Their island civilization on Crete thrived on trade and artistic brilliance until the volcano on nearby Thera erupted with cataclysmic force around 3,600 years ago. This wasn't just an explosion, it was an apocalypse. Tsunamis taller than 5-story buildings raced across the Aegean, smashing ports and coastal cities. Volcanic ash blotted out the sun for years, triggering global temperature drops that ruined harvests as far as Egypt and China. The Minones' vibrant frescoes and intricate palaces survived, but their society never recovered. Here's what chills archaeologists: these weren't primitive cultures. Both the Acadians and Minones had advanced warning systems. Acadian grain storage could last years. Minone architects built earthquake-resistant palaces, yet they still fell. Modern climate science reveals an even darker pattern. Ice cores from Greenland show that around the same time as these collapses, the entire planet entered what scientists call the 4.2 kiloyear event, a sudden climate shift that dried up monsoons in Asia, shrunk rivers in Africa, and possibly even doomed China's Liangzhu culture along the Yangtze. The frightening truth: these civilizations didn't just suffer bad luck. Many had already pushed their environments to the brink through deforestation and over-irrigation, leaving them vulnerable when disaster struck. It's a lesson etched in ruins. When nature unleashes its fury, even the most brilliant societies can vanish almost overnight. Yet some mysteries defy easy explanation. The Khmer Empire's sprawling capital of Angkor survived for centuries through monsoons and droughts, thanks to an ingenious hydraulic system of reservoirs and canals. But eventually, even this marvel of engineering failed. Recent laser scans of the jungle reveal something startling. Angkor's water network was so vast and complex that a single catastrophic flood may have breached critical dams, turning life-giving canals into instruments of destruction. The very innovation that sustained them might have accelerated their downfall. What separates the civilizations that adapted from those that disappeared? Look at Egypt, a society that endured for 3,000 years despite droughts, invasions, and political chaos. Their secret: flexibility. When Nile floods grew unpredictable, they shifted farming techniques. When foreign powers invaded, they absorbed new ideas. Resilience, it seems, isn't about strength alone, it's about knowing when to let go of what no longer works. As modern satellites track melting ice caps and shifting weather patterns, these ancient ruins whisper a warning. The greatest threat isn't the disaster itself, but our ability or inability to change course before it's too late. War doesn't just claim lives, it erases histories. Few examples are as stark as the Hittites, a Bronze Age superpower whose ironclad armies once dominated modern-day Turkey. Their capital, Hattusa, boasted towering walls and vast libraries filled with cuneiform tablets. Then, around 3,200 years ago, the city burned. Not by accident, but in a systematic destruction so thorough that even the Hittite language vanished for millennia. Was it the mysterious sea peoples raiding across the Mediterranean? Internal rebellion sparked by famine, or a perfect storm of both? The truth is buried in ash layers and clay tablets that end mid-sentence, as if the scribes themselves fled mid-word. The Khmer Empire's fate shows how war can bleed a civilization dry over centuries. Ankerwat's breathtaking temples mask a darker story. Carvings depict brutal battles with neighboring kingdoms, while inscriptions boast of kings dragging entire populations back as slaves. But each victory came at a cost. By the 1400s, constant warfare had stretched their armies thin, while rival states adopted gunpowder weapons the Khmer ignored. Their once unstoppable empire shrank until the jungle reclaimed their cities, leaving behind stone faces staring blankly at forgotten conquests. Then there's Roanoke, the infamous lost colony of America. When English settlers vanished from their makeshift village in the 1580s, the only clue was the word Croatoan carved into a post. For centuries, historians assumed Native American attacks or assimilation. But recent discoveries hint at a grimmer possibility. Spanish raiders from Florida may have slaughtered them to prevent England gaining a foothold. A single conflict we'll never fully understand erased an entire community, leaving only whispers and speculation. What ties these collapses together isn't just violence, it's the unraveling that follows. War drains grain stores, diverts labor from farms to fortifications, and severs trade routes that once sustained cities. The Hittites' fall triggered a regional dark age where writing disappeared for generations. The Khmer's decline left their sophisticated canals to silt over, turning a hydraulic marvel into a malaria-ridden swamp. And Roanoke's disappearance froze English colonization attempts for decades. Perhaps the most unsettling lesson lies in what these ruins don't show. Unlike climate disasters or epidemics, war leaves deliberate scars, smashed statues, defaced monuments, weapons buried in mass graves. These aren't accidents of nature, but choices. When societies fracture, the greatest threat often isn't the enemy at the gates, but the decisions made in desperation behind them. As archaeologists brush dust from shattered city gates, one question lingers: how many of history's mysterious collapses were actually violence, quietly rewriting the past? Prosperity can be the most deceptive trap of all. Take the Indus Valley civilization, a marvel of urban planning that thrived for nearly 1,000 years. Their cities boasted standardized weights, intricate drainage systems, and trade networks stretching from Mesopotamia to the Himalayas. But their greatest strength, reliance on the mighty Indus River, became their fatal weakness. When seismic shifts or climate changes altered the river's course, entire trade routes dried up overnight. Imagine the shock: merchants waiting for ships that never arrived, farmers watching their fields turn to dust, leaders scrambling to explain why the lifeblood of their society had simply vanished. Without that constant flow of goods and ideas, the system collapsed like a sandcastle at high tide. The Romans faced a different kind of economic unraveling. At its peak, the empire's currency was so trusted that silver denarii circulated from Britain to India. But as conquest slowed and mines emptied, emperors began watering down coins with cheap metals. Prices skyrocketed. In one infamous case, a measure of wheat that cost 200 sesterces under Nero soared to 200,000 just 2 centuries later. Soldiers demanded higher pay, farmers abandoned fields they couldn't afford to tend, and the government printed more worthless money to cover the gaps. It wasn't barbarian invasions that destroyed Rome's economy. It was the slow bleed of trust, the moment people realized the system was built on empty promises. Then there's the cautionary tale of Easter Island. Isolated in the Pacific, the Rapa Nui people carved those iconic moai statues, transporting them across the island using vast quantities of timber. But as trees vanished, so did the ability to build fishing canoes. Their main protein source vanished overnight. Starvation set in, rival clans toppled each other's statues, and a society that once numbered in the thousands dwindled to mere hundreds. The chilling part, they likely saw it coming. Pollen studies show deforestation took generations, yet no one stopped. When your identity is tied to tradition, whether carving statues or minting coins, change feels like surrender. What links these collapses isn't just bad luck, it's the way societies become prisoners of their own success. The Indus Valley couldn't imagine life without their river. The Romans clung to an inflationary death spiral, and Easter Islanders kept carving even as their forests burned. Modern economists call this the overshoot loop, when a civilization grows beyond what its environment can sustain, then doubles down on the very practices speeding its demise. Today, as global supply chains stretch thinner and resources grow scarcer, these ruins whisper a question. When the next crisis hits, will we have the courage to abandon what no longer works, or will we too become archaeologists' puzzles for future generations to unravel? A civilization's greatest vulnerability isn't always its walls or its wealth, it's the intangible threads of culture that hold everything together. The Olmecs, often called Mesoamerica's mother culture, carved towering stone heads with unmistakable faces, yet left no written language to explain their meaning. Were they kings, gods, ancestors? Without words, their stories are locked in silent stone, their rituals and beliefs reduced to guesswork. It's a haunting reminder, when a society's voice fades, even its grandest monuments become riddles without answers. The ancestral Pueblones tell a different kind of story. For centuries, they thrived in the American Southwest, building elaborate cliff dwellings and intricate road networks. But when drought and resource scarcity forced them to migrate, something unexpected happened. Their physical journey was successful, they survived, yet their cultural identity fragmented along the way. Without the shared spaces of their cliffside villages, without the seasonal ceremonies tied to their ancestral lands, their traditions slowly unraveled. The people endured, but the civilization, as it had been, vanished. This pattern repeats across history. The Rongo-Rongo script of Easter Island, a mysterious system of glyphs, remains undeciphered because the last elders who could read it died without passing on the knowledge. The Garamontes of the Sahara built underground cities to survive the desert, but when trade routes shifted, their language, a unique branch of Berber, dissolved into obscurity. In each case, the true collapse wasn't just material. It was the moment when parents stopped teaching their children the old stories, when priests forgot the words to ancient prayers, when a generation realized too late that they were the last keepers of a dying flame. Globalization today mirrors these ancient pressures in unsettling ways. Indigenous languages disappear at a rate of 1 every 2 weeks. Traditional crafts, music, and oral histories vanish into the homogenizing tide of modern life. But here's the crucial difference. Unlike the Olmecs or the Garamontes, we can see it happening. Digital archives, grassroots revival movements, and global collaborations offer tools these lost civilizations never had. The question isn't just whether cultures will fade, it's whether we'll choose to act while there's still time. Perhaps the most poignant lesson lies in what endures. The Mayas' written language was silenced for centuries until modern scholars painstakingly revived it. Ancestral Puebloan pottery designs, once nearly forgotten, now inspire contemporary artists. Even in extinction, echoes persist. The challenge for our interconnected world is recognizing that cultural preservation isn't about freezing the past. It's about ensuring that future generations inherit more than just the bricks of our cities, but the living soul of what made them meaningful. Archaeology isn't just about digging up the past, it's about listening to whispers across centuries. Take Cahokia, the sprawling metropolis near modern-day St. Louis. Its earthen mounds still rise like silent sentinels, some taller than a 10-story building. Beneath them lie traces of a city that once rivaled medieval London in population, with plazas for ceremonial games and trade networks stretching from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. But when archaeologists sift through the layers, they find no grand finale, no sacked temples or mass graves. Instead, they uncover subtler clues, soil samples showing deforestation, skeletal remains revealing malnutrition, and pottery styles abruptly changing as if new traditions took hold. The story these fragments tell isn't one of sudden catastrophe, but a slow unraveling, a society perhaps outgrowing its land, its people dispersing like leaves on a winding river. Then there are the Nazca lines, those enormous geoglyphs etched into Peru's desert floor. From the ground, they're just shallow grooves in the earth, but from above, they transform into hummingbirds, spiders, and geometric shapes stretching for miles. For decades, theories ranged from astronomical calendars to alien landing strips, but recent discoveries add nuance. Broken pottery at line intersections suggests ritual processions, while isotopic analysis of human remains points to pilgrimages from distant regions. The lines weren't just art, they were a sacred landscape, a place where people converged to commune with deities or ancestors. Yet without written records, we're left reconstructing ceremonies from scattered offerings, like trying to understand a symphony by studying only its sheet music fragments. What makes these puzzles so compelling and so frustrating is how evidence can be both abundant and elusive. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, carved pillars depicting scorpions and vultures predate Stonehenge by 6,000 years, hinting at a hunter-gatherer society capable of monumental architecture. But why bury their sacred site intentionally? At Angkor, LiDAR technology reveals a sprawling urban grid hidden beneath jungle canopy, yet we still don't know why such a sophisticated water system failed. Every breakthrough raises new questions. Tree rings in Choco Canyon show decades of drought, but why did the ancestral Puebloans stay so long, and what finally made them leave? The real challenge lies in separating fact from folklore. Take the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde, long assumed to be defensive strongholds until researchers noticed most were built facing south, optimized for winter sun exposure. Or the Viking settlements in Newfoundland, once dismissed as myth until a single rusted nail confirmed their presence. Even carbon dating, archaeology's gold standard, has limits. A charred seed might tell us when a fire happened, but not whether it was accident or arson. Perhaps the most humbling lesson is how much we project onto the past. The Minones were labeled peaceful flower worshippers until evidence of child sacrifice emerged. The Mayas' collapse turned out to be not a disappearance but a political fragmentation, their descendants still thriving today. Each correction reminds us that history isn't a static script, it's a palimpsest, constantly rewritten as new tools like DNA analysis or satellite imaging shed light on old assumptions. What endures isn't just the artifacts, but the questions they provoke. When a Cahokia copper workshop is found empty of tools, was it abandoned in haste or carefully decommissioned? When Nazca potsherds showed traces of hallucinogens, were they used for vision quests or healing rites? These gaps in the record aren't failures, they're invitations, reminding us that the past isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a conversation spanning millennia. And sometimes the most eloquent voices are the ones that speak through silence. There's something hauntingly beautiful about a city without people, a place where time stands still and every crumbling wall seems to whisper secrets. Petra, carved into rose-red cliffs, was once the thriving heart of the Nabatean trade empire, its temples and tombs bustling with merchants from across the ancient world. Then, around the 7th century, it emptied. Was it earthquakes that shattered its water channels, or did shifting trade routes slowly starve it of life? The answer lies somewhere in the silence, in the way sunlight still filters through its abandoned colonnades, as if waiting for voices that will never return. Ankerwat tells a different story, one of gradual surrender. The Khmer Empire's crowning jewel, with its lotus-shaped towers and intricate bas-reliefs, didn't vanish overnight. Instead, it faded like a slow exhale, its canals clogging with silt, its priests departing as Buddhism replaced Hinduism, its once teeming streets yielding to the jungle's relentless grip. Today, the roots of strangler figs weave through its stones, not as invaders, but as silent witnesses to nature's patient reclamation. Then there's Pompeii, frozen in a single, catastrophic moment. When Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it didn't just bury a city, it preserved a snapshot of Roman life. A loaf of bread sits charred in an oven, a dog's skeleton still wears its bronze collar, and plaster casts of victims capture their final postures. Unlike Petra or Anker, Pompeii's tragedy became its immortality, offering us an intimacy with the past that few ruins ever could. Machu Picchu, though, is the ultimate enigma. Perched high in the Andes, this Incan citadel was abandoned before Spanish conquistadors even arrived. Some say it was a royal retreat, others a sacred sanctuary. But why leave such a masterpiece? Was it disease, civil war, or simply the slow unraveling of an empire? The stones won't say. Instead, they stand in mist-shrouded silence, their purpose as elusive as the clouds that dance between their walls. What unites these places isn't just their abandonment, it's the way they force us to confront impermanence. These weren't backwater villages, they were pinnacles of human achievement, cities that must have seemed eternal to those who walked their streets. Yet here they are, stripped of noise and motion, reduced to postcards and pilgrimage sites. Maybe that's why we're drawn to them. They're mirrors, reflecting our own fragility, reminders that even the mightiest civilizations are just chapters in a story that never truly ends. The real magic lies in what we're still discovering. In Petra, ground-penetrating radar recently revealed a massive, unknown structure buried beneath the sand. At Anker, laser scans uncovered entire suburbs hidden by centuries of vegetation. Even Pompeii yields new secrets, freshly excavated frescoes, untouched by time. These cities aren't dead, they're sleeping, and with every technological advance, we learn to listen a little closer to their dreams. So the next time you see a photo of these places, don't just admire their beauty. Ask yourself, what echoes linger in those empty corridors? What laughter, what prayers, what last desperate breaths still cling to the stones? Ruins aren't just relics, they're invitations. To wonder, to remember, and perhaps to heed the quiet warning they carry across the ages. The Maya story reads like a riddle etched in stone. Their cities, once pulsing with life, now stand as hollow giants swallowed by jungle vines. Picture Tikal at its height, priests tracking Venus across the sky with uncanny precision, scribes recording histories in intricate glyphs, farmers tending terraced fields that fed tens of thousands. Then, between the 8th and 9th centuries, the great cities of the southern lowlands Palenque, Capon, Calakmul fell quiet, not with a bang but with a whisper. The last dated monument at Tikal was erected in 869. By 900, its plazas echoed only with the calls of howler monkeys. What makes the Maya collapse so perplexing isn't just the scale of abandonment, it's the contradictions. Hieroglyphs reveal a world of rival kingdoms locked in brutal warfare, with captives sacrificed to appease gods. Yet these same texts boast of alliances sealed through royal marriages and trade in jade and obsidian. Soil cores tell another story. Layers of pollen show maize cultivation thriving, then abruptly disappearing as prolonged droughts parch the land. But here's the twist: some cities in the northern Yucatan, like Chichen Itza, flourished for centuries longer. If drought was the killer, why didn't it strike equally? Archaeologists piece together clues like detectives at a millennia-old crime scene. At Capon, mass graves hold skeletons with signs of malnutrition and violent trauma, suggesting a society unraveling from within. Yet in the Patane Basin, LiDAR scans reveal vast networks of terraces and canals, evidence of sophisticated adaptations to environmental stress. The Maya didn't just wither away, they fought back. They engineered reservoirs to store rainwater, shifted crops to drought-resistant varieties, even altered their diets. So why did these efforts ultimately fail? The answer may lie not in a single catastrophe, but in a cascade of failures. Imagine a nobleman in a crumbling city, watching as crops fail for the third straight year. His people whisper that the gods are angry, perhaps because their king lost a battle or neglected an ancient ritual. Trust in rulers erodes, trade routes snap as neighboring cities descend into chaos. The social contract fractures, and one day, families simply walk away, carrying their belongings to smaller, safer settlements. This wasn't an extinction, but a dispersal, a retreat from grandeur to resilience. Today, over 6 million Maya people preserve their ancestors' language and traditions, living proof that collapse isn't always annihilation. Their ancestors' cities may sleep beneath the jungle, but the culture never died. That's the ultimate lesson of the Maya. Civilizations don't always end. Sometimes they transform. The stones of Tikal whisper not of defeat, but of reinvention, a reminder that survival isn't about clinging to power, but adapting to change. The Indus Valley civilization is history's most tantalizing silent film, a sprawling urban masterpiece where every brick whispers of sophistication, yet no one left subtitles. Picture streets laid out in perfect grids, houses with indoor toilets connected to a city-wide drainage system, and standardized weights for trade stretching from Mesopotamia to the Himalayas. This wasn't just advanced for its time, it was revolutionary. But here's the twist. While the Egyptians were carving hieroglyphs and the Mesopotamians pressing cuneiform into clay, the Indus people left behind thousands of inscribed seals and tablets in a script that remains stubbornly undeciphered. It's as if they built a symphony and then threw away the sheet music. What makes their disappearance even more baffling is the sheer normalcy of their final days. Unlike Pompeii's frozen chaos or the Maya's drought-stricken ruins, Indus cities like Mohenjo-Daro show no signs of violent overthrow or sudden catastrophe. The streets weren't littered with weapons or skeletons, they were just empty. Archaeologists find evidence of gradual decline, wells abandoned, trash piles growing in once immaculate courtyards, and trade goods from distant lands becoming scarcer. The river that sustained them, the mighty Saraswati mentioned in ancient texts, may have shifted course or dried up entirely, turning fertile plains into dust bowls. But here's the kicker: other river-based civilizations faced similar droughts and adapted. Why didn't the Indus people? Then there's the invasion theory. For decades, scholars pointed to the arrival of the Indo-Aryans as potential disruptors, citing later Vedic texts that describe battles and fortified cities. But recent excavations reveal a problem. There's no archaeological smoking gun, no layers of ash from sacked cities, no sudden change in artifacts. Instead, the evidence suggests a slow unraveling, like a tapestry fraying at the edges until the whole pattern dissolves. The real enigma lies in their silence. Those cryptic symbols on their seals, they average just 5 characters, too short for literature or complex records. Some researchers think it's not a full language at all, but a system of clan marks or trade notations. Others believe the key rests in the seal's intricate artwork. The unicorn-like creatures and meditating figures might hold clues to a spiritual world we can't yet grasp. But hope isn't lost. In 2023, researchers used AI to analyze the script's patterns, comparing it to known linguistic structures. Meanwhile, groundwater surveys in Rajasthan are mapping the ghostly traces of the lost Saraswati River, which could reveal how environmental stress reshaped their world. Every broken pot, every worn-out step in Mohenjo-Daro's Great Bath is a breadcrumb trail waiting to be followed. Perhaps the most humbling lesson of the Indus Valley isn't about their collapse, it's about our own limitations. We're so accustomed to history told through kings and conquests that a civilization thriving without obvious rulers or wars defies our expectations. Their egalitarian cities, with nearly identical houses and no grand palaces, suggest a society that prioritized collective well-being over individual glory. In that silence, there's a challenge to rethink what makes a civilization great, and to wonder how much we're still missing about the quietest chapters of the human story. Easter Island stands as one of history's most haunting paradoxes, a remote paradise turned cautionary tale. Imagine a land where towering stone moai statues gaze inland, their solemn faces carved by a society that once thrived in isolation. For centuries, the Rapa Nui people built an intricate culture, transporting these multi-ton monuments across the island using log rollers and rope, but their greatest achievement may have sealed their fate. Pollen samples tell a grim story. As statue construction accelerated, the island's once lush palm forests vanished. Without trees to anchor the soil, erosion stripped away fertile land. Without timber for fishing canoes, protein sources dwindled. And without firewood, survival itself became a struggle. What makes Easter Island's collapse so chilling isn't just the ecological disaster, it's the societal unraveling that followed. Archaeologists find spear points embedded in skeletons and toppled moai with their backs deliberately broken. Clan rivalries, once channeled into statue-building competitions, escalated into violence as resources vanished. Yet the darkest twist lies in the timing. When Dutch explorers arrived in 1722, they described a barren wasteland with starving inhabitants. But recent evidence suggests the worst damage may have come later, not from the islanders themselves, but from European whalers and slavers who brought disease and abduction. The Rapa Nui didn't just fail to adapt, they were struck by outside forces at their most vulnerable moment. This story resonates today because it mirrors our global predicament. Like Easter Island, Earth is an isolated system with finite resources. Like the Rapa Nui, we face the consequences of prioritizing short-term gains over long-term survival. But there's a crucial difference. We can see the warning signs. Satellite imagery tracks deforestation in real time. Climate models predict droughts before they arrive. The question isn't whether we'll repeat Easter Island's mistakes. It's whether we'll choose to act while there's still time. The island's true lesson isn't about inevitability, but agency. Before collapse, the Rapa Nui shifted from Moai construction to Birdman cults, worshipping fertility rather than ancestors. They adapted, but too late. Their story whispers a challenge across the centuries. Innovation alone isn't enough if it's not paired with the wisdom to change course. As modern societies grapple with overconsumption and climate crises, those silent stone faces ask us the hardest question of all, not how we'll endure, but what we're willing to sacrifice to ensure we do. High on the sun-baked cliffs of the American Southwest, the stone walls of Mesa Verde still cling to the canyon faces like ancient sentinels. These weren't just shelters, they were multi-story apartment complexes carved into the rock with round ceremonial kivas sunk deep into the earth. The ancestral Pueblones, often called the Anasazi, didn't just live here, they thrived for generations, storing harvested corn in meticulously designed granaries, painting vivid geometric murals, and tracking the solstices with astronomical precision. Then, around the late 1300s, something extraordinary happened. They walked away, not in panic but deliberately, sandals shuffling across the stone floors one last time, doors sealed behind them, possessions left in place as if they might return tomorrow. The mystery isn't just why they left, but why they moved into the cliffs in the first place. For centuries, these ancestors of modern Pueblo peoples had lived in open villages on the mesa tops. Then, suddenly, they began building in the most improbable places, perched on narrow ledges, accessible only by hand and tow trails or retractable ladders. Was it defense? Tree rings from the region reveal a devastating drought stretching nearly 50 years, a period archaeologists call the Great Drought. But drought alone doesn't explain the move to cliffs. If anything, it would have made water access harder. Here's where the story twists. Excavations at some sites reveal signs of violence, burned timbers, skeletons with blunt force trauma, even evidence of cannibalism. Some researchers believe social tensions erupted as resources dwindled, turning neighbors against one another. Others point to a more subtle clue, the kivas. These sacred spaces, once communal, began shrinking over time as if ceremonies became more exclusive. Could a religious or political schism have fractured their society? Yet the most compelling answers come from the descendants themselves. Hopi and Zuni oral traditions speak of migrations, not flights from disaster, but purposeful journeys guided by spiritual signs. Their stories tell of cycles of moving to maintain balance with the land. Modern Pueblones don't see abandonment in those empty cliff dwellings. They see a chapter in a longer story. Perhaps the truth lies in the architecture itself. At Choco Canyon, hundreds of miles away, timbers from distant mountains were hauled to build monumental great houses, only for the site to be emptied decades before Mesa Verde's exodus. Like a slow wave, the ancestral Pueblones seem to have been consolidating, dispersing, and adapting for centuries. Their disappearance wasn't an ending, it was a transformation, a shifting of ways as deliberate as the turning seasons. Today, as tourists peer into those silent rooms, the wind carries echoes of a lesson we're still learning. Sometimes the most resilient act isn't holding on but knowing when to let go. The jewel of Southeast Asia, Ankerwat, rises from the jungle like a mirage, its lotus-shaped towers and intricate bas-reliefs telling stories of gods and kings. But this architectural marvel was just the heart of something far greater. The Khmer Empire's sprawling hydraulic network, a masterpiece of engineering that turned monsoon floods into life-giving abundance. For centuries, an intricate system of canals, reservoirs, and moats stretched across hundreds of square miles, taming the seasonal deluges into a steady flow that fed rice paddies and quenched a metropolis of nearly 1 million people. The largest reservoir, the West Barre, could hold over 50 million cubic meters of water, enough to fill 20,000 Olympic-sized swimming pools. This wasn't just infrastructure, it was the empire's lifeline, a liquid clockwork that allowed the Khmer to thrive where others struggled. Yet this very innovation may have seeded their downfall. Recent studies of tree rings and sediment layers reveal a disturbing pattern: decades of erratic monsoons, swinging between devastating droughts and catastrophic floods. The Khmer system, designed for predictability, couldn't handle the chaos. Reservoirs silted up, canals overflowed their banks, and rice yields plummeted. But here's the twist: it wasn't just nature's fury. LiDAR scans show that later Khmer rulers kept expanding the network, building more canals and diverting water to grand projects like the Temple Mountain of Angkor. In their quest to showcase power, they may have overstrained the system, turning a solution into a vulnerability. Politics poured salt in the wound. As harvests faltered, neighboring kingdoms like the Ayutthaya smelled blood. Inscriptions boast of Khmer victories, but temple art tells another story. Bas-reliefs at Bayonne depict not just celestial dancers but brutal naval battles. The empire's once unshakable grip began to slip. By the 1400s, Angkor's canals were clogging with sediment, its reservoirs becoming malaria-breeding swamps, and its people dispersing to smaller, more flexible settlements near the Tonle Sap Lake. The Khmer didn't vanish, they adapted, shifting their capital south to Phnom Penh. But the lesson lingers in those crumbling stones. Even the most brilliant systems fail when they can't bend. Modern megacities now face eerily similar tests. Like Angkor, places like Bangkok and Jakarta rely on intricate water management, battling floods and sinking land as aquifers are drained. The difference: we have satellites to track groundwater loss, weather models to predict monsoons, and materials the Khmer couldn't dream of. But technology alone isn't enough. Angkor's engineers were brilliant, but their rulers kept doubling down on grandeur. The real test isn't whether we can build, but whether we can let go. As climate change rewrites the rules, those ancient reservoirs whisper a warning. Resilience isn't about controlling nature, but dancing with its rhythms. Perhaps that's why Ankerwat endures. Its stones, reclaimed by strangler figs and silk cotton trees, don't just symbolize collapse, they showcase nature's quiet persistence. The Khmer's legacy isn't a tale of defeat, but a challenge to build with humility, to plan for flexibility, and to remember that even the mightiest empires are guests in nature's house. The Minones didn't just build cities, they crafted a civilization that seemed to defy the limits of its time. Picture Knossos, its labyrinthine palace alive with vibrant frescoes of leaping dolphins and bull dancers, its storerooms stocked with saffron and Cretan wine destined for ports across the Mediterranean. This was a society so advanced, it had flush toilets and light wells when much of Europe was still in the Stone Age. But around 3,600 years ago, the ground beneath them roared to life. The volcano on Thera, modern Santorini, erupted with a force estimated at 10 times that of Krakatoa. Walls of water 30 stories high raced toward Crete, smashing its fleet of trading ships. Ash blotted out the sun for years, choking crops and turning summer into winter. Yet what's fascinating isn't just the disaster, it's how the Minones responded. Archaeological layers at Knossos show they rebuilt, patching cracked walls and repainting murals, but something had shifted. Their once dominant trade networks frayed as Egyptian and Cypriot merchants, wary of the unstable region, turned to others. Then came the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece, warriors who saw opportunity in Crete's weakness. Initially trading partners, they gradually took control, their heavy fortresses a stark contrast to the Minones' open, unwalled palaces. The final blow may have been more insidious than invasion. A series of earthquakes around 1450 BC toppled already weakened structures, leaving the survivors to assimilate into Mycenaean culture. This slow unraveling raises haunting questions. Was Plato's story of Atlantis, a sophisticated island kingdom swallowed by the sea, inspired by fragmented memories of the Minones? The parallels are uncanny. An advanced maritime power, catastrophic earthquakes and floods, even the concentric rings of Thura's caldera mirroring Plato's description of Atlantis's capital. But the real lesson lies deeper. The Minones didn't vanish overnight. Their culture was eroded by layers of disaster, economic collapse, and cultural absorption. Their fate reminds us that even the most brilliant civilizations are vulnerable not just to sudden blows, but to the slow erosion of the foundations that sustain them. Modern excavations reveal another twist. Before Thura's eruption, the Minones had already begun declining. Tree rings indicate a prolonged drought, while sediment cores show overfarmed soil losing fertility. The volcano may have been less a death sentence than the final push for a society already teetering. Today, as we study their ruins, we're left with a poignant truth. The Minones' greatest legacy might be the warning they whisper across millennia. Prosperity is fragile, and adaptation isn't optional. Their painted dolphins still leap on crumbling walls, frozen mid-motion, as if caught between the world they knew and the oblivion that followed. The whispers of Roanoke still send chills down the spines of historians, a fledgling English settlement reduced to ghostly silence overnight. Picture the scene in 1587, wooden cabins freshly built, gardens just beginning to yield crops, and the hopeful bustle of men, women, and children carving out a life on the edge of the known world. Then Governor John White returns from a supply trip to England, delayed by war for 3 long years, only to find the settlement deserted, no signs of struggle. No hastily buried dead, just empty buildings, a single word carved into a palisade post Croatoan, and the eerie absence of the very cross they'd agreed would signal danger. For centuries, the fate of the lost colony has been a puzzle wrapped in speculation. Early theories pointed to the Croatoan people, a native tribe living on nearby Hatteras Island. Some accounts from later English settlers mention encounters with light-skinned, English-speaking Native Americans, possibly descendants of assimilated colonists. But recent archaeology adds layers to the story. Excavations on Hatteras have uncovered Elizabethan-era artifacts, a rapier hilt, a slate writing tablet, even a gold signet ring that may have belonged to one of Roanoke's gentlemen. These finds suggest at least some settlers sought refuge with the Croatoans, blending into their communities rather than facing starvation alone. Yet another thread leads 50 miles inland. At a site called Site X near the Albemarle Sound, archaeologists unearthed fragments of Surrey, Hampshire border pottery, a type only Roanoke settlers would have used. This discovery hints at a splinter group attempting to relocate, perhaps following earlier plans to move the colony. But here's where the mystery deepens. No European skeletons have been found, and native oral traditions from the region speak of a group of outsiders who went into the earth, a phrase some interpret as mass murder. The darkest theory involves Spain's shadowy role. Spanish agents in Florida had orders to eradicate any English foothold in the New World. A recently uncovered map from the era, dubbed the Virginia Pars, shows a hidden symbol, a fort drawn in invisible ink near the Chowan River. Was this where survivors fled, only to be intercepted by Spanish raiders? A single clue fuels this idea. In 1590, a Spanish ship reported finding a cross on the Carolina coast, a potential marker of a Catholic burial, something the Protestant English wouldn't have left. Roanoke's true legacy isn't just the vanishing, it's the way this single failure reshaped history. The disaster terrified England, delaying further colonization attempts until Jamestown in 1607. Those later settlers arrived paranoid, quick to violence against native tribes, their fears poisoned by Roanoke's ghost. Perhaps the most haunting realization is this: the colony didn't just disappear. It shattered into fragments, some assimilated, some slain, some lost to time, each piece a silent witness to the brutal realities of America's birth. The word Croatoan endures not as an answer, but as a reminder of all the stories history swallows whole. The rose-red city of Petra doesn't just impress, it bewilders. How could a civilization carve an entire metropolis from sheer rock faces, channeling water through a desert with near miraculous precision? The Nabateans weren't just builders, they were hydrological geniuses, turning one of the Middle East's harshest landscapes into a bustling hub where spices, silks, and incense flowed like the water in their hidden aqueducts. Their wealth wasn't measured in gold, but in control of trade routes linking China to Rome, of desert wells known only to their guides, of secrets kept so closely that even today we're piecing together how they thrived. Then came Rome. In 106 AD, Emperor Trajan annexed Petra, not with fire and sword, but with paperwork and promises. The Nabatean king, Rabble Roman II, died under suspicious circumstances, and his kingdom became Rome's Arabia Patria province. At first, it seemed a pragmatic shift. Roman roads replaced camel caravans, and Petra's merchants gained access to vast new markets. But the trade that had once made the Nabateans indispensable now bypassed them entirely. Roman ships sailed directly to India, cutting out the middlemen who'd grown rich guiding goods across the desert. The city's decline wasn't sudden. It was a slow bleed, as if the lifeblood of commerce had been rerouted beneath their feet. Yet Petra's ruins tell a subtler story. In the street of facades, tombs bear inscriptions not in Nabatean, but in Greek and Latin. Temples blend native deities with Roman gods. Dashara, their chief god, was equated with Zeus. This wasn't erasure, it was adaptation, a civilization folding itself into the empire's fabric while clinging to its identity. But the desert is unforgiving. When a massive earthquake struck in 363 AD, toppling columns and crushing aqueducts, Petra lacked the resources to rebuild. The Nabateans didn't vanish, they dispersed, their descendants likely among the Bedouin tribes who still called Jordan home. The real mystery isn't why Petra fell, but how it endured so long. In an era when empires rose and fell like desert storms, the Nabateans outlasted Assyria, Babylon, and even Persia, not through conquest but through cunning. They taxed caravans but offered protection. They guarded water sources but shared them for a price. Their greatest legacy might be the lesson etched into those wind-worn facades. Sometimes survival isn't about dominating the game but mastering its rules. As modern supply chains stretch across the globe, Petra stands as a monument to the power and fragility of connection. The Clovis people left behind a signature so distinct, you could spot it from across an archaeological dig, those fluted spear points, chiseled with precision to bring down giants. Picture the scene 12,000 years ago. Small bands of hunters tracking mammoths across the vast, grassy plains of Ice Age North America, their every survival hinging on the perfect throw. These were the continent's first known widespread culture, their artifacts scattered from Montana to Mexico, a testament to their adaptability. Then, in what feels like a geological blink, they vanish. No gradual decline, no scattered remnants, just silence. What makes their disappearance so perplexing isn't just the abruptness, but the timing. Right as the Clovis fade, so do the megafauna they relied on. Mammoths, mastodons, even towering short-faced bears. For decades, the dominant theory pointed to overhunting. a Pleistocene overkill where humans, armed with those lethal spear points, wiped out their own food supply. But newer evidence complicates the story. Sediment cores from ancient lake beds reveal something startling: a layer of microscopic diamonds and scorched earth dating to exactly this period, hints of a cosmic impact like a comet fragment exploding in the atmosphere. Could a sudden climate shift triggered by this event have disrupted ecosystems faster than the Clovis could adapt? Yet here's the twist: some researchers argue the Clovis didn't truly disappear. Their technology evolved, blending with new tools as groups shifted from hunting mammoths to smaller game like bison. Genetic studies of modern indigenous populations suggest continuity, as if the Clovis didn't vanish but dispersed, their descendants weaving into the tapestry of later cultures. But if that's true, why do those iconic spear points stop appearing? The mystery deepens when you consider the landscape they left behind. At sites like Blackwater Draw in New Mexico, Clovis artifacts lie buried beneath a distinct layer of sediment, a geological divider marking some profound change. Above it, later cultures left different tools, as if the rulebook for survival had been rewritten overnight. The most haunting clue: a handful of Clovis sites show evidence of hurried campsites, as if people were on the move, fleeing something we can't yet name. Perhaps the real lesson of the Clovis lies in their silence. They remind us that even the most resilient cultures exist at the mercy of forces beyond their control, whether shifting climates, vanishing prey, or celestial accidents. Their spear points, once symbols of mastery, now sit in museum cases like unanswered questions. But in that uncertainty, there's a challenge: to keep digging, because the story of the first Americans is still being written, one fluted stone at a time. The Tartessos civilization haunts the edges of history like a half-remembered dream. A culture so wealthy, ancient Greek writers described its rulers dining on silver tables beneath golden grapevines. Nestled in southern Spain's Guadalquivir River delta, this enigmatic society thrived on trade, extracting precious metals from the Iberian Peninsula's veins and funneling them across the Mediterranean. Their artisans crafted intricate gold jewelry adorned with Phoenician motifs, and their language, preserved on a handful of mysterious stelae, remains just beyond translation's reach. Then, around the 6th century BCE, Tartessos vanishes from the historical record as abruptly as a ship slipping beneath the waves. What makes Tartessos so tantalizing is the gap between legend and reality. Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a king named Arganthonios who ruled for 80 years and generously funded Phoenician expeditions. Yet no definitive Tartessian royal tombs or palaces have been found. The biblical Tarshish, famed for its silver trade, may reference Tartessos, but concrete proof remains elusive. Archaeologists face a puzzle. Did Carthaginian invaders, hungry for control of metal-rich territories, raze Tartessos to the ground? Or did the very geography that blessed them, a low-lying river delta, betray them as rising sea levels submerged their cities? Recent discoveries hint at answers. Near Hulva, a 9th century BCE burial site revealed Tartessian aristocrats buried with ivory, amber, and weapons, confirming their far-reaching trade networks. Yet the most compelling clues might lie underwater. Sonar scans of the Gulf of Cadiz show strange geometric shapes beneath the sediment potential ruins, drowned by centuries of shifting coastlines. One theory suggests a catastrophic tsunami, like the one that devastated Lisbon in 1755, could have erased Tartessos' coastal hubs overnight. But here's the twist: Tartessos might not have disappeared at all. Later Iberian cultures, like the Turdetani, preserved elements of Tartessian art and metalwork, suggesting a cultural evolution rather than a collapse. The real mystery isn't just their fate, It's why a civilization so influential left so few traces. As marine archaeologists comb the Andalusian coast with magnetometers and drones, Tartessos lingers like a shadow at the edge of history, daring us to separate fact from fable. Its greatest lesson: some civilizations don't vanish, they simply dissolve into the landscape, waiting for the tides of time to reveal them again. Deep in the forests of modern-day Romania and Ukraine, the Cucuteni Tripilia people built something extraordinary: settlements so vast they dwarfed any other Neolithic villages in Europe. Picture clusters of hundreds, sometimes thousands, of tightly packed homes, their plastered walls painted in vivid spirals and zigzags, their streets humming with activity. These weren't just villages, they were proto-cities housing up to 20,000 people at a time, a scale unmatched for millennia. But here's the twist: every 60 to 80 years, these thriving communities would gather their belongings, set their entire village ablaze, and walk away only to rebuild from scratch miles away, repeating the cycle for over 1,000 years. The first question that comes to mind is why. Archaeologists have sifted through the ashes of these intentionally burned settlements, uncovering clues that hint at a society steeped in ritual. Some theorize the fires were purification ceremonies, a symbolic rebirth to cleanse the community of misfortune or spiritual pollution. Others point to practical reasons. Layers of burnt clay reveal homes infested with parasites or pests, suggesting controlled burns may have been a public health measure. But the most tantalizing possibility is that these weren't acts of desperation, but of tradition, a cultural rhythm as deliberate as the seasons. Then there's the mystery of what they left behind. Excavations show households emptied of valuables before the fires, with only broken pottery and animal bones left in the ashes. No signs of violence, no hastily abandoned tools, just orderly departure. Could this have been a form of social reset, a way to prevent wealth accumulation and maintain equality? The sheer scale of coordination required, moving an entire population, rebuilding homes, redistributing resources, suggests a society with remarkable collective discipline. Yet the enigma deepens when you consider their neighbors. While other Neolithic cultures fortified their villages against raids, the Cucuteni Tripilia built no walls, no defenses. Their art, filled with goddess figurines and symbols of fertility, speaks of a people more focused on creation than conquest. But around 3500 BCE, the burnings stopped. The mega villages shrank, then vanished entirely. Was it climate shifts drying up their farmland, pressure from migrating steppe tribes, or did their own traditions, once a source of strength, become a cage they couldn't escape? The haunting beauty of their painted pottery, the precision of their spiral motifs, all of it whispers of a people who understood impermanence in a way we struggle to grasp. They built not for eternity, but for cycles, as if they knew that sometimes the only way to move forward is to let the past burn. Their legacy isn't just in the ruins they left behind, but in the question they force us to confront: what would we sacrifice to keep our own societies from crumbling? Rising like earthen pyramids from the fertile floodplains of the Mississippi River, Cahokia's mounds once dominated the horizon, monuments to a society that rivaled any in the ancient Americas. At its peak around 1100 CE, this sprawling city boasted a population of 20,000, its grand plaza hosting ceremonies that drew pilgrims from hundreds of miles away. The tallest mound, Monk's Mound, covered more ground than the Great Pyramid of Giza, its terraces likely supporting temples where rulers communed with the heavens. Yet by 1400, the plazas lay silent, the thatched roof houses empty, the intricate trade networks that stretched from the Great Lakes to the Gulf Coast severed. The Mississippians didn't just fade, they left behind a puzzle wrapped in soil and bone. The first clues to their collapse lie in the land itself. Core samples from nearby lakes tell a story of erratic weather, decades of punishing droughts followed by catastrophic floods, a pattern that would have devastated maize crops, the lifeblood of Mississippian society. But here's the twist: Cahokia had weathered climate shifts before. Their engineers built sophisticated drainage systems to manage floods, and their granaries could store surplus harvests. So why did this time prove fatal? Archaeologists point to the skeletons. Burials from Cahokia's final century show stark disparities. Elite graves filled with shell beads and copper ornaments, while commoners' remains reveal signs of malnutrition and physical stress. The very social hierarchy that once stabilized the city may have fractured under pressure, with ruling classes hoarding resources as the climate soured. Then there's the eerie evidence of rebellion. At the base of Monk's Mound, researchers uncovered a mass grave of young men, their bones bearing marks of blunt force trauma and arrow wounds. Were they executed prisoners or victims of an uprising against the elite? Nearby, a wooden palisade was rebuilt multiple times, as if the city feared enemies at its gates. But were those enemies outsiders or their own starving citizens? Unlike the Maya, whose descendants preserved language and traditions, the Mississippians left no direct cultural heirs. When French explorers encountered the Natchez people centuries later, their mound-building practices were a faint echo of Cahokia's grandeur. The most haunting discovery isn't in the ruins, it's in the trees. Dendrochronology reveals that just before Cahokia's fall, the surrounding forests were vanishing at an alarming rate. The Mississippians needed timber for construction, fuel, and fortifications, but their appetite may have outstripped nature's ability to recover. Erosion from denuded hillsides choked the rivers with silt, disrupting fish populations and irrigation canals. In their drive to sustain growth, they may have unwittingly dismantled the very ecosystem that birthed their civilization. What lingers in Cahokia's abandoned earthworks isn't just mystery, it's warning. Here was a society that mastered floodplain agriculture, engineered monumental architecture, and forged vast alliances, yet couldn't adapt when their world changed. As modern cities grapple with rising seas and social inequality, those silent mounds ask us the hardest question of all. When the next crisis comes, will we be builders or survivors? The once mighty citadels of Mycenae and Turin stand today as broken crowns atop the hills of Greece, their massive cyclopean walls scarred by fire, their storied halls reduced to ash and silence. Around 1200 BCE, something shattered the Bronze Age world, and the Mycenaeans, those fierce, gold-masked warriors who had dominated the Aegean for centuries, were among its most spectacular casualties. Their collapse wasn't just the fall of a civilization, it was the unraveling of an entire era, plunging Greece into a dark age that would last for generations. The scale of destruction is staggering. Archaeological layers at Pylos reveal a palace burned so intensely that its clay tablets, inscribed with the Linear B script, were accidentally preserved by the heat. At Thebes, storerooms full of olive oil and grain were left to rot amid the ruins. But what's truly chilling isn't the violence, it's the precision. These weren't random raids. The targeting of administrative centers suggests someone knew exactly where to strike to cripple the Mycenaean world. Enter the infamous Sea Peoples, a shadowy coalition of marauders mentioned in Egyptian records as sweeping across the Mediterranean like locusts. Reliefs at Medinet Habu depict them in horned helmets, attacking in ships and chariots, leaving devastation in their wake. Yet here's the problem: we don't know who they truly were. Were they displaced refugees, climate migrants fleeing drought-stricken homelands, or opportunistic pirates exploiting a world in chaos? The Mycenaeans, with their coastal palaces and reliance on trade, would have been prime targets. But the Sea Peoples might just be a convenient scapegoat. Dig deeper, and you'll find signs of a society already teetering. Tree rings from Anatolia to Ireland document a period of severe drought around this time, a perfect storm of crop failures and famine. Earthquakes rock the region, toppling walls and destabilizing kingdoms. And then there's the internal decay. Linear B tablets from Pylos speak of desperate rationing, of bronze being confiscated to forge weapons, of women and children sent to work in the fields. The Mycenaeans weren't just attacked, they were exhausted. Perhaps the most haunting clue lies in what happened next. With the palaces gone, the art of writing vanished for over 400 years. Greece fragmented into isolated villages, its people reverting to subsistence farming. The grand frescoes of bull leapers and chariot processions gave way to simple geometric pottery. It's as if the very memory of centralized power had been erased. Yet amidst the ruins there are glimmers of resilience. At some sites, survivors repurposed shattered palace stones into humble homes. Oral traditions passed down through generations may have kept fragments of Mycenaean legends alive, echoes that later resurfaced in Homer's epics. The Mycenaeans didn't truly disappear, they transformed, their legacy woven into the DNA of classical Greece. Their collapse forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes civilizations don't fall to a single enemy or disaster, but to a web of pressures, environmental, economic, social, that finally snaps under the strain. The Mycenaeans' greatest lesson isn't in how they fell, but in how fragile even the mightiest empires can be when the threads holding them together begin to fray. The story of the Rapa Nui people is often told as a tragedy, a civilization that carved its own demise by toppling the very statues that defined it. But peel back the layers of myth, and you'll find something far more remarkable, a people who refused to vanish. When their island's last palm tree fell and the soil blew away in the wind, they didn't just surrender, they reinvented. For generations, the Rapa Nui had measured their wealth in moai, those towering stone guardians lining the coast. But as deforestation accelerated, the old ways became impossible. No logs meant no rollers to transport statues. No canoes meant no deep-sea fishing. Famine crept in and clans turned on each other, toppling rival moai in a symbolic erasure of power. Yet this wasn't the end, it was a pivot. Oral traditions speak of the Birdman cult, a radical shift where leadership was decided not by ancestry but through a perilous race. Each year, warriors scaled sheer cliffs to retrieve the first sooty-turn egg of the season. The winner's clan gained temporary rule, a system that rewarded agility over tradition. Then came the unthinkable slave raids. In the 1800s, Peruvian ships descended like storms, carrying off nearly half the population, including elders who held the island's genealogies and chants. Those who survived returned to a shattered world, bringing smallpox and despair. Yet again, the Rapa Nui adapted. They embraced Christianity not as surrender, but as a lifeline, blending it with ancestral beliefs. Today, their Tapati festival revives old sports and dances, stitching fragments of memory into a living culture. The real lesson of Easter Island isn't collapse, it's metamorphosis. Modern Rapa Nui farmers now practice rock gardening, a technique their ancestors used to grow crops in barren soil. Activists fight to protect their language, once banned by Chilean authorities. Even tourism, often a double-edged sword, fuels a resurgence of traditional crafts. The moai still stand, but they're no longer relics of a dead civilization. They're symbols of a people who weathered the unthinkable and chose to endure. Their story challenges us to rethink what survival really means, not the absence of crisis, but the courage to transform within it. The parallels between our modern world and those vanished civilizations are impossible to ignore, like shadows stretching across millennia. Today's megacities, with their glittering skyscrapers and labyrinthine supply chains, aren't so different from the Khmer's hydraulic empire or Rome's interconnected provinces. We face the same existential pressures: climate fluctuations rewriting agricultural maps, dwindling resources sparking geopolitical tensions, and social fractures widening under economic strain. But here's the crucial difference: we're watching it happen in real time, with satellites mapping deforestation and algorithms predicting water scarcity before wells run dry. Consider Anker's fate, a masterpiece of engineering undone by its own rigidity. Their sprawling canal network, designed for predictable monsoons, collapsed when weather patterns shifted. Now look at Miami, where rising sea levels are forcing engineers to raise streets and install pumps, fighting a battle against tides that won't retreat. Or California's aqueducts channeling water across deserts as reservoirs hit historic lows. The warning isn't just about environmental change, it's about the peril of inflexible systems. The Khmer kept expanding their water network even as it failed them, much like we keep drilling deeper into depleted aquifers rather than reimagining our relationship with water. Yet history also offers glimmers of hope. The Maya didn't vanish, they dispersed, adapting their traditions to smaller, more resilient communities. Today, indigenous farmers in Guatemala are reviving ancient milpa agriculture, intercropping corn with drought-resistant squash and beans, just as their ancestors did. In Rajasthan, engineers are restoring thousand-year-old stepwells to combat groundwater loss, blending old wisdom with new technology. These aren't retreats, they're reinventions, proving that survival isn't about stubborn dominance but creative adaptation. The greatest lesson from these lost civilizations isn't doom, it's agency. Easter Island's society fractured when they prioritized statues over forests, but they also pioneered the Birdman cult to redistribute power. The Romans printed worthless currency as their economy crumbled, yet medieval Venice later invented double-entry bookkeeping to stabilize trade. Collapse isn't inevitable, it's the result of choices. We're the first civilization with global data networks shouting warnings, with renewable energy outpacing fossil fuels in cost efficiency, with the collective memory of 5,000 years of stumbles and rebounds etched into our digital archives. What's haunting isn't the possibility that we'll fall like the Mycenaeans or the Tartessians, it's that we might ignore the blueprint they left behind. Their ruins are more than relics, they're stress tests for human ingenuity. When the next crisis hits, whether a pandemic, a crop failure, or a failing grid, we won't be judged by our grandest achievements but by our willingness to change course. The Maya's last glyphs weren't prophecies of doom, they were records of kings trying, failing, and trying again. That's the real inheritance we've been given, not a fate but a chance. Beneath the waves off Japan's Yonaguni Island lies a structure so perplexing, it blurs the line between geology and human ingenuity. Towering stone terraces, right-angled platforms, and what appear to be staircases descend into the deep, all carved with a precision that seems impossible for natural erosion alone. Some researchers argue these formations are remnants of a lost civilization, perhaps a Pacific counterpart to Atlantis, submerged when rising seas swallowed coastal cities at the end of the last ice age. Others insist it's merely an extraordinary quirk of sandstone fracturing under tectonic pressure. The truth, even after decades of study, experts remain divided. What's undeniable is the eerie sense of intention behind those geometric shapes, as if the ocean floor itself is whispering secrets we can't quite decipher. Half a world away, the Dogon people of Mali present another riddle wrapped in stars. Their oral traditions describe Sirius not as a single star, but as a binary system, a fact Western astronomy only confirmed in the 19th century with telescopes. They speak of Sirius B, a dense white dwarf invisible to the naked eye with startling accuracy. How could a remote tribe possess such precise celestial knowledge centuries before modern science? Skeptics suggest colonial-era contamination, that missionaries or anthropologists inadvertently planted the idea. Yet Dogon elders maintain these stories predate outside contact, passed down through generations in sacred ceremonies. The chilling possibility lingers. Could this be a fragment of some long-lost advanced understanding, preserved in oral tradition while the civilizations that birthed it crumbled into dust? Then there's the Voynich manuscript, a 15th century book written in an alphabet no one can read, filled with illustrations of plants that don't exist and celestial charts that defy known astronomy. Cryptographers from World War II codebreakers to AI algorithms have failed to crack its cipher. Is it an elaborate hoax, a lost language, or something far stranger? A glimpse into a paradigm of knowledge so alien we lack the framework to comprehend it. These mysteries share a common thread. They force us to confront the limits of our understanding. History isn't a tidy puzzle with all pieces accounted for. It's a tapestry riddled with holes where some threads lead nowhere and others hint at patterns we're only beginning to glimpse. The Yonaguni formations, the Dogon stars, the Voynich's unreadable pages, they're not just curiosities. They're humbling reminders that the past still holds cards it hasn't revealed. And perhaps that's the most thrilling possibility of all, that some enigmas aren't meant to be solved, but to keep us questioning, exploring, and wondering what else might be waiting just beyond the edges of our maps. These vanished civilizations are more than just historical curiosities, they're cautionary tales etched in stone and soil. Think of the Maya's abandoned observatories, their astronomical precision lost for centuries, or the Indus Valley's silent streets, where a society thrived without leaving behind a single deciphered word. These aren't just stories of the past, they're blueprints of human resilience and vulnerability, offering urgent lessons for a world facing climate upheaval, resource depletion, and social fragmentation. Archaeologists don't just dig up artifacts, they reconstruct whole worlds from fragments. Take the work being done at Çatalhöyük in Turkey, where 9,000-year-old murals reveal how early humans transitioned from nomadic life to settled communities. By studying their adaptations, how they stored grain, managed waste, or resolved conflicts, we gain insights into modern urban challenges. Similarly, linguists racing to decode scripts like linear or the Indus Valley symbols aren't just solving puzzles. They're recovering voices silenced for millennia, voices that might hold answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask. Climate scientists, too, are turning to these ancient sites as time capsules of environmental change. Pollen samples from Greenland's ice cores and sediment layers in Mesopotamian ruins track droughts and floods that toppled empires. When researchers analyze the collapse of the Acadians or the Anasazi, they're not just documenting history, they're creating models to predict how modern societies might respond to similar stresses. Parallels are unnerving: over-irrigation draining aquifers, deforestation triggering erosion, trade networks collapsing under political instability. The past isn't just prologue, it's a live diagnostic tool. Yet preservation isn't just about data, it's about identity. For descendant communities like the Maya or the Hopi, these ruins are sacred archives, proof of ancestral ingenuity. When looters strip a tomb or rising seas swallow coastal sites like Pavloptri, we don't just lose objects, we lose chapters of the human story. Projects like the digital reconstruction of Palmyra, destroyed during Syria's civil war, show how technology can safeguard heritage even when stone crumbles. Ultimately, these efforts are a race against time and against our own short-sightedness. The same technologies accelerating climate change also give us tools to counteract it, just as the same globalization threatening cultural diversity enables unprecedented collaboration. The lesson of these lost civilizations isn't that collapse is inevitable, but that survival demands humility, adaptability, and the wisdom to listen to whispers from the past. Their ruins stand as both memorials and mentors, urging us to weave their hard-won lessons into the fabric of our future. These lost civilizations may have crumbled into dust, but their echoes still shape our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. The Mayas' precise astronomical calculations live on in modern calendars, their concept of zero revolutionizing mathematics. The Romans' concrete recipes, lost for centuries, are now inspiring eco-friendly building materials that heal their own cracks. Even the Indus Valley's standardized weights foreshadowed today's global trade systems. Their physical cities fell, but their ideas became immortal, passed down through generations like a whispered secret that refuses to fade. What makes these stories so compelling isn't just the mystery of their endings, but the startling relevance of their struggles. When we study the Khmer Empire's water management failures or the Greenland Norse's refusal to adapt, we're not just observing ancient history, we're holding up a mirror to our own climate crises and cultural inflexibility. The Rapa Nui's Birdman cult shows how societies can reinvent themselves under pressure, while Cahokia's social fractures warn us about inequality's corrosive power. These aren't cautionary tales about them, they're urgent memos addressed directly to us. Perhaps the most profound lesson lies in the silences between the artifacts. For every grand pyramid or intricate fresco, there are countless ordinary moments lost forever. The laughter in Mesopotamian marketplaces, the lullabies sung in Viking longhouses, the whispered secrets of Minoan priestesses. Archaeology gives us glimpses, but never the full picture. That incompleteness is what keeps us searching, analyzing, and reinterpreting. Just last year, new LiDAR scans revealed entire Mayan cities hidden beneath Guatemalan jungles, proving we've barely scratched the surface of these mysteries. As we piece together their puzzles, we're ultimately asking the biggest question of all: what does it mean to endure? Is it the physical survival of a people, like the Mayas' living descendants, the persistence of ideas, like Roman law echoing in modern courts, or the haunting beauty of ruins that still stir our imaginations centuries later? These civilizations challenge us to expand our definition of legacy beyond stone and conquest, to recognize the quiet, resilient threads that connect humanity across time. So the next time you walk past a storm drain or glance at a calendar, remember, you're interacting with inventions perfected by societies that vanished. Their genius, their failures, their hard-won lessons are woven into the fabric of our daily lives. The real treasure hidden in these lost cities isn't gold or artifacts, but the chance to learn from masters who navigated challenges frighteningly similar to our own. Their ruins stand as both memorial and mentor, whispering across the ages. This is how civilizations end and how they